Let's go to Hawke's Bay now, where health authorities have told the government inquiry into the water contamination. There is anecdotal evidence a large number of elderly who fell ill haven't fully recovered. Our reporter Peter Fowler has been at the inquiry for the past 2 weeks, and as it wrapped up today, I asked him via Skype video if we were any closer to understanding what made more than 5,000 people so violently ill in August of last year.
Well, I think we are, John. There was plenty of evidence that was presented at this hearing about ground zero, which is essentially where I'm standing right now. Behind me, you can probably see a sort of a tree. So I'm standing at the bore where essentially that tree behind me is where there's a pond. And around me, you can probably see in the background some fields. So what happened was evidence was presented that it was feces from those sheep in those paddocks that was washed into this pond during heavy rain. And they say it's highly probable that essentially when they turned the bore on, it sucked all the water out of that pond into the bore. They did a dye test, which was evidence presented at the inquiry, which showed it took 29 hours for that water to essentially go into the bore. And it took 2 days for the Campylobacter that was in that pond to appear in the bore. So they replicated what happened, and the dye test essentially showed it was highly probable that that was the cause.
The inquiry heard today from the Medical Officer of Health, what did he say?
Well, he said, Dr. Nicholas Jones, Medical Officer of Health at the Hawke's Bay District Health Board, he said that there are still people that have not recovered from this. I mean, it was 6 months after this event occurred, and he says that elderly people are still not recovered, and there are long-term effects of this. He said there are arthritic problems, there are gastro problems, and he said that this is anecdotal evidence, but what they need to do is do a study and find out the extent that these people are actually, how many people are still sick. But he mentioned the word large numbers.
Peter, this is a difficult question to answer, and I guess we won't know the answer to this until we see the reports. But do you think this has been a meaningful exercise or a kind of pro forma obligatory response? You know, when you get into trouble in New Zealand, you have an inquiry. In other words, is there a sense there that this will stop this from happening again in Hawke's Bay and anywhere in New Zealand where groundwater is drunk?
Well, I think the first thing, John, is that there are over 5,000 people who will think that this inquiry is worthwhile. They certainly want to know what made them violently ill. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had a gastro bug, but it's a nasty, nasty thing to have. And the other thing you've got to consider is who's heading this inquiry and who's running this inquiry. You've got a retired appeal court judge, Lynn Stevens QC, who has kept a tight rein on this inquiry. And it was very clear to observers at these hearings that he's dead keen to get to the bottom of this, and he's pulling out all the stops, and he's not taking any nonsense at all, and they are asking the hard questions. And one thing that's come out that I think will come out in his final report is what has been described during the hearings as a dysfunctional relationship between especially the regional and Hastings district councils. So I think I get a sense from sitting there that we are going to get some really solid outcomes, and that we are going to find out what's going on. And remember, this is a very powerful sort of panel you've got here. And what's at stake could be chlorination of every water supply in New Zealand. I mean, that's the sort of recommendations they may come up with.
So that's one potential recommendation. We're now waiting for the report, obviously. What happens from here, Peter? Yes.
Well, phase one we've just been through is really looking at what caused this contamination, and phase two, which they haven't really had a chance to get to because, of course, the Hastings District Council took legal action, the Hastings Regional Council took legal action against the Hastings District Council, trying to prosecute it over the thing. The inquiry forced them to drop that legal action, but what it did was it delayed them, because remember, they've got to report back by the 31st of March. So phase one, they've sort of gone through. what caused it, what are the lessons we learned, but then phase 2 is still coming up, is what are the wider implications of this? What does it mean for the rest of the country? And we still haven't got to that phase of the inquiry yet, John.
Peter Fowler from Havelock North.